Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 14th, 2024. It has been 3,791 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 115 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 112 days since Russia expanded its war aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Thursday and Friday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. The RAM-up updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands North, South and East of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. Our earlier assessment that Russia would carry out missile and drone strikes targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure through Saturday, June the 15th, was regrettably accurate. 2. We maintain that Russia's spring-summer offensive failed to achieve any of its operational goals after 53 days. It has reached its end, entering a new phase with a smaller set of operational goals. 3. The sharp increase in aggressive acts by the Russian Federation directed at the NATO alliance and its member nations is a direct result of the failed policy of de-escalation and excessive fear of Moscow's tactical nuclear threats. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox. 4. Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 5. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022. As outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March the 5th. 6. We maintain the quantity of artillery ammunition available to Ukrainian frontline units is reaching a level where the stabilization of existing defensive lines has started in several areas of operation. 7. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is encouraging escalation. 8. Autocrat Putin has started the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, led by the FSB, since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 9. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Russia carried out another missile and drone attack on Ukraine using 295 MS strategic bombers and MiG-31K tactical aviation, launching 10 Kh-101 and 555 cruise missiles with cluster munitions, 1 Kh-47 M2 Kinzhal air-to-surface ballistic missile, 3 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles launched from the Tambov region of Russia, and 17 Shahed-136 one-way drones. Ukrainian air defenses intercepted 7 of the cruise missiles and all the Shahed UAVs. During the attack, Poland scrambled F-16 fighters, and the United States Air Force KC-135 Stratotanker was on station between Lublin and Helm, Poland. Missiles and drones were shot down over the Khmelnytsky, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Odessa, Zaporizhzhia, Dnipropetrovsk and Kirovograd oblasts, with the Khmelnytsky Oblast the main target. At the time of recording, a new air raid is ongoing, and that's all we could share. In the Donetsk Oblast, Selidove was attacked, damaging 10 high-rise apartment buildings, 3 administrative buildings and retail shops. 5 civilians were injured. Russian shelling of the village of Vostre killed 1 person and damaged private homes. Unrelated to tonight's missile attack, Ukrainian air defenses shot down a Russian missile over Novomoskovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Debris was spread over a large area, damaging 91 private homes, 5 schools, and natural gas pipelines. 6 people were injured, including 2 children. Here is today's action report. Russia carried out 126 assaults on Wednesday and 87 through Thursday evening, concentrating their combat power northwest of Avdiivka. Through June the 12th, the 7-day moving average increased to 98, near the same level of April the 27th, and down 28% from the May the 17th peak of 136. We maintain that the Russian spring-summer offensive has ended, and Moscow has shifted most of its available combat power to the Avdiivka and Vuhledar areas of operation, or AO. Now for the assessment of the day from our analyst team. Yesterday at the G7 summit in Italy, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz wrote on Twitter, also known as X, quote, "Putin has a plan. He wants to push the war until everyone gives up supporting Ukraine. His plan failed today. At the G7, we are mobilizing $50 billion for Ukraine to defend its sovereignty, a historic step." Unquote. We agree with Scholz's statement. The Kremlin's political strategy has failed, with the next major hurdle coming in November when the US holds national elections. Barring a major shift in Washington, Ukraine's allies have rallied to provide years of military and economic support. In our assessment, the perfect storm that has engulfed the Kremlin was of its own making. Multiple intelligence agencies uncovered the depths of Russia's hybrid warfare and espionage across Europe, which continues to become increasingly kinetic. Military leaders warned that Russia's defense industry was increasing output, and Moscow was sending clear signals that if Ukraine fell, Russia would eventually attack the NATO alliance. In late April, when Russia was forced to start its spring-summer offensive early, Ukrainian forces prevented a Russian breakthrough at Chasiv Yar and Ocheretine and stopped the Russian attack on the northern edge of the Kharkiv Oblast. All before significant renewed US aid arrived at the front lines. At the risk of belaboring the point, the Russian bombing of the epicenter hypermart in the city of Kharkiv was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. It shouldn't have required dozens of Ukrainian civilians killed and wounded on a late spring afternoon shopping at a home improvement store, but the response was immediate. In the June elections in the EU, some far-right political parties increased the number of seats they hold in the Council. However, it mostly came at the expense of pro-Russian far-left politicians such as Claire Daly and Mick Wallace in Ireland, who both lost their re-election bids. The center-right parties in Europe did well, signaling that continued support for Ukraine is politically safe. Yesterday's historic security agreement between the US and Ukraine outlined in no uncertain terms the US goal for Ukraine: total victory, re-establishing the 1991 borders, and a path to independent national security, EU and NATO membership. Additionally, the G7's authorization to provide $50 billion in aid through loans guaranteed by Russian assets broke the taboo on using those funds. The latest round of US, UK and Canadian sanctions have real teeth and hit at a time when the Central Bank of Russia was already running out of options to keep the economy on track. There's another silver lining. There is still a significant amount of promised military aid from 2023 and early 2024 that has been delivered to Ukraine. While frustrating, most of that heavy equipment and ammunition is slated to arrive in late 2024 and early 2025. Additionally, contracts signed in 2023 to deliver new equipment in 2025 and 2026 are on track to be fulfilled. The combat potential for the individual Ukrainian soldier is already starting to increase and will continue to, while for Russia it is in a slow decline. The free world sent a strong message from 6 continents yesterday. They stand with Ukraine. Not just for as long as it takes, but prepared to provide the Ukrainian people everything they need to achieve victory and a just peace. Now, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsy-Vovchansk AO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk, with Ukrainian sources reporting that Russian troops had been cleared from the apartment towers and industrial area in the central district, but did not provide supporting evidence. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, reported 2 more Russian assaults in the direction of Tykhe, with both failing. Fighting continued in Hlyboke, with Ukrainian armor entering from the southeastern corner and advancing to the village center. This provided visual confirmation of the earlier Ukrainian advance, and we adjusted the map. Near the settlement of Shebekina in the Belgorod region of Russia, a bomb fell off a Russian aircraft and exploded. Russian officials reported no civilians were injured. Ukrainian drone operators continued to interdict Russian supplies, moving the supply lines leading to the Ukrainian border. More than a month after crossing into Kharkiv to create a sanitary zone around Belgorod, Russian citizens are already growing weary of the constant air raid warning and border shelling. Residents who live near Belgorod International Airport gathered to film an appeal to Belgorod Region Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov for the installation of bomb shelters, saying there are none in the area. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces attempted to advance in the direction of Petropavlivka from Velshana and Peshchane without success. In the Svatove AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces tried to advance into Berestove and advance in the direction of Stelmachivka and Grekivka without success. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siversk AO, Russian forces made another attempt to advance in the direction of Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, suffered losses and retreated to their defensive positions. Ukrainian source Deep State reported that Russian troops made a small advance southeast of Rozdolivka. After an operational pause, Russian forces increased the intensity of their attacks in the Kostiantynivka AO. There were 11 assaults on the eastern edge of Kalinivka, and fighting continued in the Canal district of Chasiv Yar. Ukrainian forces held their defensive positions. Positional fighting continued on the western edges of Ivanivsk, and 3 Russian attacks near Andriivka were repulsed. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces carried out 33 assaults in the Avdiivka AO and made additional tactical gains. Ukrainian forces repulsed an attack from Arkhangelsk in the direction of Kalinova. Fighting also continued in Novo-Alexandrivka. Russian forces made marginal gains toward Yevhenivka and re-entered the village of Sokil. Russian mercenary blogger Wogonzo described the advance as a, quote, small tactical success. Russian forces raised a flag in the western part of Novopokrovsk, capturing the village. A Russian sabotage and reconnaissance unit was eliminated in the area of Mezheve, and Russian forces started to push in the direction of Novoselivka-Persha. Ukrainian and Russian sources reported that fighting continued east of Yasnobrodivka, and Wogonzo reported fighting continued between Netailove and Karlivka. Russian forces also carried out attacks south and east of Nevelske, with no change in the situation. In occupied Gorlivka, rockets fired by HIMARS hit a Russian unit near the line of conflict, with an embedded news crew with the Russian state media agency NTV. Camera operator Valery Kozhin and propagandist Alexei Ivlev were killed, and a third unnamed person was in critical condition. Fighting continued in the Vuhledar AO, with Russian and Ukrainian sources reporting intense fighting in Krasnogorivka. There were no reports of changes in territorial control. Russian forces launched an assault on eastern Georgievka, involving 2 companies supported by 19 tanks, armored personnel carriers, and improvised armored total tanks. Further south, Russian forces continued to carry out attacks in Paraskoviivka. The Black Sea Fleet has 1 Kilo-class submarine on patrol capable of launching Kalibr cruise missiles. In the Sea of Azov, there were 9 vessels, including 3 missile frigates capable of launching 24 Kalibr cruise missiles. Additionally, the Russian Navy rescue and recovery vessel Spasatel Ilyin was zigzagging in the eastern Black Sea between the Kerch Strait and Novorossiysk, Russia. The ship is capable of inspecting and repairing damaged undersea infrastructure and is operating in an area where there is an undersea pipeline and communication cables that connect to Turkey. A US Navy MQ-4C Triton drone flew southwest of the area where the Spasatel Ilyin is operating. On the night of June the 12th, Ukraine launched 12 ATACMS missiles, with Russia claiming 7 were intercepted. The strike destroyed an S-400 air defense battery north of Verkhnyo-Sadove. Satellite images showed the 92N6 gravestone generator, engagement radar and at least one 51P6 launcher were destroyed. Remember when people used to say, "What's air defense doing?" It's getting wrecked. That's what it's doing. The head of the main Defense Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine, Kyrylo Budanov, reported that Russia had deployed its newest S-500 air defense system to occupied Crimea. Based on the S-300V air defense system with modified 9M82M interceptors, the missiles are significantly larger than the PAC-2 and PAC-3 interceptors used by the Patriot air defense system, and use a different technological solution to maneuver in flight. Because of their size, each launcher on the S-500 only has 2 missiles, compared to 8 on the Patriot. That means the S-500 can prioritize fewer targets and is easily saturated.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers and analysts is funded by readers, listeners and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Ukraine launched up to 90 one-way drones across Russia, targeting the Rostov, Belgorod, Volgograd, Voronezh and Kursk regions. Of course, Russia officially claimed all drones were intercepted. In the Rostov region, Governor Vasily Golubev reported that power was knocked out in parts of the Morozovsk district. The main target was the Morozovsk military airfield. Preliminary reports suggested at least one Su-34 multi-role fighter was destroyed. Voronezh Oblast Governor Alexander Gusev said that an oil depot in the Lysky district was hit by several drones, causing minor damage to fuel storage tanks, but no fire. Video recorded in the Vladimir Oblast showed a Su-30 fighter firing an air-to-air missile, reportedly at a Ukrainian drone. Ukrainian drones also targeted the Halina air base in Kursk. In Moscow, a building of the campus of the Sukhoi Design Bureau, the developer of aircraft such as the Su-34, erupted in flames. Smoke covered the area with the fire spreading to 800 square meters. The Kremlin insisted the building was empty and unused. Here is my theater-wide update. Yesterday, at the G7 summit in Italy, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky and President of the United States Joe Biden signed a 10-year bilateral security agreement between the United States and Ukraine. During remarks after the signing, President Biden said 5 countries have agreed to assist Ukraine with air defense, adding that for buyers of current orders from the United States, quote, "We made it clear to those countries that expect to receive American air defense systems in the future that they will have to wait. Everything we have will go to Ukraine." The security agreement will, quote, "support Ukraine's efforts to win today's war and deter future Russian aggression," unquote. The United States will provide cooperation to accelerate Ukraine's integration into the European Union and interoperability with NATO. This includes, quote, reorganizing command and control structures in accordance with NATO principles to increase interoperability and ensure effective civilian oversight. Critically, Article 5 defined that victory for Ukraine is, stating, quote, Ukraine will not be secure until its sovereignty and territorial integrity are fully restored through a just peace that respects Ukraine's rights under international law, including the UN Charter. Unquote. President Zelensky and the Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, also signed a 10-year security agreement. In 2024, Japan will provide Ukraine with $4.5 billion in aid, and over the next 10 years will give security and defense assistance, humanitarian aid, and technical and financial cooperation. Speaking at a press conference, Zelensky said that he had spoken with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who assured him that China would not supply weapons to Russia. The G7 leaders agreed to create a $50 billion loan for Ukraine that will be secured by almost $300 billion in seized Russian assets and paid using the earned interest income. While an agreement has been reached, the when and how still needs to be worked out. After a draft of the proposed resolution that would be signed at the upcoming Ukrainian Peace Summit in Switzerland came under fire, a new draft was submitted to world leaders. The first version made no mention of Russia's war of aggression and called for Ukraine to potentially accept an alternative agreement that would trade territory for peace. When Swiss officials released the first draft, there was deep concern the watered-down language would damage Ukraine's prospect of achieving a just peace. The new language calls for the unconditional return of the 1991 borders and mentions the violations of the UN Charter by Russia. An audit by the Department of Defense Inspector General concluded that from August 2021 through April 2024, the Pentagon overvalued equipment and munitions sent to Ukraine by $1.9 billion. The funds came from the congressionally authorized Presidential Drawdown Authority. It is unclear if the $1.9 billion will be added back to PDA for future use. Thierry Breton, the European Commissioner for Internal Markets, said that EU large-caliber ammunition production would reach 1.7 million rounds per year by the end of 2024, surpassing the United States. By the end of 2025, production will grow to 2.5 million per year. The Pentagon extended its deal with SpaceX to provide military-grade satellite internet service from Starlink to Ukraine through November 30, 2024. The deal with the US Space Force cost $14.1 million. Dutch Defense Minister Kajsa Ollongren announced that Ukraine would receive $375 million in 152mm artillery ammunition, which her country had purchased. Norway announced it was transferring $45 million in ammunition to Ukraine, including hand grenades and small arms ammunition for sniper rifles. Canada pledged to provide Ukraine with 2,000 decommissioned CRV-7 rocket mortars, 29 Nanook remote weapon systems, and over 130,000 rounds of small arms ammunition. The Canadian government has not authorized the full transfer of over 83,000 expired CRV-7 rockets after it was concluded they were stable enough for transfer. Romania announced that it would finance another group of Ukrainian pilots to receive training on the F-16. The NATO Flight Training Center, hosted by Romania, opened at the end of 2023. Argentina became the 57th nation to join the Ukraine Contact Working Group after President Javier Milei reversed course and agreed to attend the Ukrainian Peace Summit in Switzerland. Milei attended their June 13th Working Group meeting. Slovenia reportedly supplied Ukraine with 26 BOV armored personnel carriers, 3 M80A infantry fighting vehicles, and an undisclosed number of Humvees, better known as Hammers. And that's what we know. Join me again on Monday and we'll do this all over again. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.